Hello, Georgetown. I'm Beverly Enos, and you're watching Spotlight Georgetown. You can find us Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Now, this whole cable process, the equipment and the show and all of this is part of your cable TV show. This comes from when you watch cable TV. Doesn't come from the town's budget. So if you would like to come down, learn how to use the equipment, run a camera, do some editing, and sometimes you can even borrow the equipment to do some work with nonprofits if you would like to do that. Just let us know. And I'm always looking for someone to interview, as I am today. Today we're talking to PamGiarratana, and she's an artist. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Now, where are you from?
Well, originally from Wakefield.
Okay.
My husband and I both went to high school in Wakefield.
How long have you been in Georgetown?
8 years.
Oh, that's not too long.
No, not too long.
Yeah. Now, why Georgetown?
Well, honestly, my husband found the golf course first, and then we looked for a place to live.
Okay.
But what I like best about Georgetown is that it's rural, and it's similar to Wakefield was when I was a child. You know, one or two stoplights, and everything is available downtown.
Yeah. When I first started coming here, I was 10 years old. We had a place up on Lake Shores. So we were summer kids, and there were no stop signs, and there were no traffic lights, and there were only 4,000 people. Actually, when I moved here, I was in high school, there were only 4,000 people, and now we've hit 8. So it took 45 years to all of a sudden double the size of the town, and now we have traffic lights. Now, you have family here in town, our family?
No, just my husband and I. My local family is my son and daughter-in-law and their 2 sons. Live in Danvers.
Oh, that's close.
That's close.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my daughter lives in, and her husband and her son live in Florida.
Okay, that's a little long for a visit to drop in. Now, we're here to talk about your painting. When did you start painting?
I can't remember not painting. I was thinking on the way up here, I believe my kindergarten teacher was an artist, and she taught us everything. It was Hope Dillaway in Wakefield, and it was classical music and dancing and always painting and art.
Really?
And so I just grew up thinking I was an artist. And then eventually, after I graduated from Wakefield High School, I went on to Massachusetts College of Art.
Oh, okay. So you do have an art
I
education
do have an art
as well.
education. I didn't graduate from there, but after that, I studied with many, many different teachers, and I continue to do that even today. I just finished a workshop with Ken Backus, who's a plein air painter.
Now, when you go to college of art, what type of classes do you take?
Well, they did grant, or they still do, grant a Bachelor of Fine Arts there. So you are required to take a core curriculum of English and history, and just like everyone else.
Yeah.
But we had at least, our classes went from 9 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. And our art classes were at least 3 hours at a time. You'd draw for 3 hours, you'd paint for 3 hours. And
Any other mediums other than paint?
Well, you did a lot of drawing, a lot of drawing. And then there was watercolor. Acrylic had just been invented. I'm talking about the early 60s. And oil paint. And we studied perspective and figure drawing, sculpture. Their core curriculum at that time was extensive. Mechanical drawing, you had to take everything, you had to pass everything for 2 years, and then you majored after that.
Wow. It's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Well, if you love art, it would be like,
it was a treat.
Right. It's not going to school. It's not going to work. It's just going to have fun. Now, you consider yourself a plein air painter?
A plein air painter, that
is that?
actually just means that, a plein air just means in the open air. It's a French term. But it basically, that's what artists do when we go out to paint outside. And I prefer that. It doesn't mean I'm not going to paint a person outside or a still life outside. Some of the paintings I brought were the first prize-winning one I was going to talk about was Backyard Blues, and that was painted right in my backyard of a chair and just a towel on the ground, and it's just the bright colors and bright sunlight and the shadows, and so it's just a matter of plein air is just painting outdoors in the natural light.
Okay,
I was coming off. Life.
I went to visit Plum Island this weekend to see what had happened after the storms, and there was a woman standing off on the side of the road in the grasses with her easel set up and a hat and her brush, and she was painting. So that's the type of
That's plein air painting. Yeah, it's not really as fancy as it sounds. It's just being outside there in the weeds with the bugs.
Now, when you do a painting like that, do you draw it first or do you just go right to the paints?
I go right to the paints. If you were doing watercolor, I think you would draw in a little bit first. If I draw anything, it's with a brush that's loaded with paint, and I just indicate, or possibly a roof line or something, so that I don't want to go off the edge, or the horizon, or the entry line, or where I want to figure or something, just very minimal.
Okay, because when I see classes, I teach in senior centers and they have painting classes, but they always draw the picture first with pencil, and then they start painting it. But they're also in a classroom situation. They're learning whatever style it happens to be.
Well, that makes it easier, but it's sort of like filling it in. It's a lot freer if you just use the paint.
It's not quite as scary, though, if you've got lines to follow.
If you've got a few lines. And actually, then the demo I'm doing, I've penciled in a little drawing just so my hand wouldn't shake.
Now, where do you get your inspiration and the choices that you make? Where do those choices come from?
Well, I think it was Emil Gruppe who said, he's a famous artist from Rockport, Gloucester area, and he said that inspiration is outside the studio. And I find that very true. If I want to go to a particular location, say I'm going up to Newburyport to Maudsley to paint, that much I know. I don't know what exactly I'm going to paint until I get there.
Really?
Yeah, because what if the rhododendrons aren't in bloom, or the lilacs have gone by, or
a squirrel is in the way,
or something is happening, there's a wedding going on or something. But I do like to have the location in mind. Okay. Otherwise you just drive around aimlessly looking for something, and it doesn't work that way. How
often do you paint?
As often as possible. I mean, a minimum, I would say, of 3 days a week. I'd like to paint every day.
And you would go someplace and do a painting?
I would go someplace, and sometimes I go to my studio, sometimes I go to my friend's studio out in Gloucester. She has a studio gallery on Rocky Neck, and we alternate painting there. Especially, we don't have great weather in New England.
True. Not always.
Not every day. We don't have California sunshine every day, so there are many days when you have to paint using photographs for reference, or a model indoors, or a still life, or something like that.
Okay. Now, you have some examples, prize winning. Can you talk about those?
Yes, I think I just mentioned was the Backyard Blues, and I did an entire series of paintings of my backyard, of things going on in my backyard, which I set up. I mean, they were setups like you'd set up a still life or something, because
you'd place the chair, you'd place the towel.
So if you're just driving around,
like that,
you may not find something, but you know if you're setting it up in your backyard that you've got all day or half a day to paint it before the light totally changes. So I did that Backyard Blue in my own backyard, and that was a winner at a national show in Cape Cod Art Association.
Oh, nice.
A few years ago. I was very pleased with that. It's a prize just to get into a show like that, let alone win a prize.
Because they're juried.
They're all juried national shows, yes.
And I don't think a lot of people understand a juried show is everybody brings their talent, their art in, and it gets judged first to see whether it will even be in the show.
Correct.
To be judged a second time.
Correct.
Okay.
And now that's all done by email and
photographs.
You have to send a CD in. It used to be slides, and now it's all digital. You send in a digital image, and the juror chooses the show from that. And then usually they'll wait and choose the prizes from the actual paintings because there is such a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, the paintings have, you've got the depth of paint and
Right. And the size, the
textures
scale
and-
is
right.
huge, a huge difference.
yeah.
And the second painting that I sent to you, the prize winner would be, look at this. Another one I did in my backyard, nasturtium cascade, which is the blue chair with the orange nasturtiums cascading out of it. And I, again, that was done in my backyard, just easier to do it that way. I believe Monet, the reason he created Giverny is he was sick of traipsing around with his paints. Not that I have Giverny in my backyard. All I have is painted chairs and a few flowers.
Now, what size would a painting like that be?
That one's 24 by 24.
Oh, good.
The first
That's a good
one's
size.
a small one. And then the third one that I wanted to talk about was the Jazz Synergy, which is almost abstract. And that was done at the Heard Museum in Ipswich. They had a Jazz Synergy program where we had 3 artists and 3 musicians who were supposed to simultaneously inspire each other. It was chaos. They
I was just
were
going to say, that doesn't sound as easy as...
unstructured jazz, and the paintings got pretty wild.
You were basically kind of trying to paint the music
I
as you heard it?
Yes, but I also, because I am a realist painter, I have to be looking. That's really where I get my inspiration, is looking at something or someone. And that's what inspires you, the colors or the line or whatever. So I painted the musicians, or 2 of them. I think I did 2 or 3 paintings that evening. And this one is very loose, but still it won a prize in Rockport Art Association, which is a very prestigious group to
Yes.
even belong to.
It is.
Let alone win a prize.
It is.
So I was happy with that.
Where can your work be seen?
Rockport Art Association, North Shore Art Association in Gloucester. Usually I have a painting there. In the winter, neither one of those are open. So my website would probably be the best place to see all of them.
What is your website?
www.pamgiart.com, pamgiart.com.
Oh, that's easy. Okay. So it's Pam, your first name, G for the beginning of your last name, and then Art.
G-I, yes,
G-I,
and then
okay.
A-R-T.
All right. Now, the materials that you use, what medium do you paint? Acrylics or?
Oils. I'm an
Oils.
oil painter.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And why oils?
I've tried everything. Watercolor, you aren't allowed to make a mistake in watercolor.
I've done some watercolors. It's tough.
You have to think, for me, the thinking in watercolor is backwards. You have to plan the whole thing and then work backwards, as you said about drawing a painting in. Acrylic is wonderful, and I did that for years, but it does have its limitations of modeling, and it dries so quickly that, and it doesn't have that depth or glow that you can get from suspended pigment in oil. And they've lasted for 500 or more years, most oil paintings. All they need is a good cleaning occasionally. And
Now, how would you clean a painting like that?
if it were of any value, you're supposed to take it to a restorer.
Okay.
But you can buy little jars of Grombacher cleaner and just...
Feather duster once in a while.
Yes, you just keep the dirt off.
I have a Barron's that I take very good care of. Now, you have some challenging paintings that you work. Now, when you paint, you said you painted 3 paintings in one evening. So normally, do you start a painting and finish it at the same time? Or will you start something and then get to a certain point and say, okay, this isn't coming right, and go back to it later?
Well, that 3 paintings in one evening was exceptional. It was to go. And when you see how loose they are, you'll understand they weren't finished paintings in that regard. Normally, I do paint alla prima. That's all at once.
Okay.
If you're painting outdoors, the light changes so quickly that you have to paint very fast. I'm a very fast painter. So if you're painting for a few hours outdoor, the light has gone from here to here, your shadows have changed, everything has changed, you're done. If you want to paint the rest of the day, you should probably start another painting and do it that way.
Okay. And then go back to the first one on another day that has the same light? Or...
If you feel you need to go back, but that rarely happens in New England, that you get 2 days that are the same. It's not California again.
Yeah.
When I do larger paintings, well, unless I'm doing them in my backyard where I have access every single day to it, I would do some of them. Sometimes I work from sketches in the studio. This painting, I did a larger painting of that, and I did the whole thing in the studio. Obviously, I didn't have Max pose for that. That's my grandson, Max. I did not have him. I had him pose for it in that I had him swim repeatedly by me while I took pictures. But I didn't make him stay there while I painted it.
So then you paint from the pictures?
In this case, I did paint from the pictures.
I do some artwork, and I photograph and then design from that. That to me is easier.
I find it more difficult, actually, because then the artwork tends to look like the photo. And I'm not inspired by a photo. I need to see the actual colors, and
that's
that
why you're the artist and I'm not.
It works better for me.
Now, what do you get what's the feeling that you get when you finish a painting?
Relief. I think it is a sense of accomplishment. If it's a really good painting and you know you're done and that's the best you can do, it's wonderful to feel that. You rarely feel that way. Usually you feel, am I finished? They say it takes 2 people to do a painting, one to paint it and one to stop them.
Okay.
And that's very true. You don't want to overwork a painting and get too many little details in and get it too fussy. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And why do you paint?
Now that's a loaded question. My goodness, why do I paint?
I just thought that one up. So.
Yeah,
Some people do things because they've always wanted to do it, or it was a goal, or...
Right. Well, it is a goal of mine to be a better painter, and I've always painted, and it's an expression of, it's what I do. I see better than, I don't see better in respect that my eyes are any better than anyone else's, but when you're painting, and immediately after you're painting, you have a heightened sense of visual acuity, so you see a lot more. It's just a heightened sense. And
you see things differently.
I see things differently, and I see much more in them than the normal person who's not looking that focused. Much as a musician hears way more than we hear.
Well, we're going to get to see you do some painting for us.
Yes, I'd like to
We're going to do a demo. So we're going to get to see Pam actually do some painting that we've been talking about. And these are oils again.
These are oils.
And as you're using the paints, you're mixing it with, what type of oil is it?
This is a medium. It's made up of oil and turpentine. And what I'm doing is painting the dark areas first with a translucent mix with nothing opaque in it, and that because it's harder to paint light, to paint dark after you've got a light down. You can't really get these clear darks. So you start with your dark pattern, and that becomes part of your composition.
Now the easel that you have, this is a portable easel. It came out of a very small tote bag, basically. Yeah. It looks like it's aluminum. It's adjustable. It can go inside, outside, anywhere.
Yes, yeah. It's very handy. It's unlike a French easel, which is awkward. Although
are those the big wooden ones?
Those are the big wooden ones that you see people schlepping around, but they can be difficult. And so, should I explain the materials here?
Sure.
I'm using a limited palette. That means in this instance, I just have 7 colors plus the white. This is cadmium yellow light, cadmium medium yellow, cadmium orange, cadmium red light, a phthalo red rose, which is actually a quinacridone red, and it's more transparent than these. These are more opaque.
And that's why they're called cadmium?
No, that's the chemical that they're made from, and they're actually poisonous, so don't eat the paint. So now what I'm doing is painting in the, and I mix both transparent and together. So in this instance, I'm putting that orange in there to dull down the grain. So if you were looking at the water, it actually would be, it would have some orange in it. It wouldn't be that dark a green. So I'm just doing that dark part to establish the shapes of what I'm painting and where I'm painting it. Now, again, I'll say, since Monet was such a big part of Impressionist in outdoor painting, I'll use him as an example. When he did the Water Lily series, what he was often painting was the sky. It wasn't so much the water lilies and the water pads, it was the reflection of the sky that you saw in there. So I'm going to paint the sky reflected around the water lilies. And the darkest colors would be in the center of the sky overhead. And you put these dark colors in here, and then we'll work up to our lighter colors, and then we'll work around the water lilies. Now, if I wanted to show something in the water, let's say, you could paint it wet into wet like this. So even though I'm taking orange, if you paint it into the blue, it's not really going to show, it's just going to show a little bit. And so there are things in the water, stems of the water lilies and so forth. We just put that in. Now I'm going to, and you notice I'm holding the brush like a brush.
Yeah.
Not like a pencil, like this. Yeah. That's
You're holding it like a paintbrush that you'd be painting a house with.
Well, like a paintbrush, that's for sure. And that's a negative shape in there, the inside of the neck. What have I got over there? Now as I come down here, I'm going to use these. I'm still working on larger shapes here. And if I make a mistake, that green is particularly difficult to work with. We don't want it to get into the white of the swan's neck. You just take a rag and clean it off.
Oh, neat.
There's a lot about rag painting. Okay, so now these are approaching a together area here, so I'm going to mix the two colors that I've just used rather than mix a whole new one and see if I can't blend that in together to show that.
One of the things in my work, we try and teach people how to blend colors with threads, which is very difficult because you can't make one color blend with another. You have to use individual colors to make them blend. But I can see how this, you can literally mix them together to create a whole new shade.
There's really 7 colors gives you an extraordinary amount of possibilities for painting. It's really 7 to the 7th power, and that comes to a huge number. Because each one of these can be mixed with each other, or with all of them, or with any combination of them in different strengths. I can paint just about any color with these 7. Although in my studio paintings, I might add another color or 2. But each time you add a color, you change the whole thing. You have to be able to add that color in. If I added cerulean blue, which I'd like to add in sometimes, I'll have to see how does cerulean mix with orange, how does it mix with red, and so forth.
Now, how long does the oil stay not dry?
Not dry, open, they call that.
Okay, thank you.
It depends on what medium you use. This is sort of a quick dry medium here, so maybe a day or two. And the oil paint you use, sometimes the paints themselves are have a slow dry to them.
Because I was watching you as you were blending that middle shade between the turquoise at the top and the darker blue at the bottom. And you can blend it right into the bottom color and it was still changing.
Yes.
So it's still wet.
And
it's
so
still
I
open.
could even go back and I would and clean this up a little, make sure that, you know, and if I want this to go in and out like a ripple.
Okay.
And maybe something there.
Because that's the
Fuss
shadow
with
of
the
the
edges.
swan.
Yes, that's the shadow of the swan in the water. And maybe I want this to be a little cleaner. And I'm getting a glare here, so it's hard for me to see exactly what I should be doing on that. But you want texture and energy in your brush strokes. So my next area to draw in would be the swan itself. And I'm going to use a little bit of the cadmium red with the blue to make it a more solid gray. Maybe that's a little too dark. You just keep correcting continually. It's never, you're never happy with it. It's never perfect. But in this case, the swan would be white, but it's never just plain old white. It's white with yellow to bring it forward and warm, or white with blue to make it recede a little. Wherever the sun strikes it, you want a lot of white. And the white is, use it thicker with the opaque colors.
You have a very solid hand. It doesn't shake at all.
Oh, good.
That would be a problem.
That was definitely one of my worries today. That's why I drew it in, because I never draw a painting in like that. But I was concerned. Now you can see I've got a little bit of a dirty brush here. I'm picking up some of the blue, but that's okay because I want this to blend in softly anyway. I want my swan to be soft there. Swans are huge too. And these swans, this particular swan happens to live in Gloucester. I was so surprised to find that they have swans in the harbor there.
Really?
Yeah, and everyone thinks they're very common there, but I was so shocked the first time I saw them. I thought it was
I've seen them
something
down
new.
in Martha's Vineyard, and we have a lot of them up in this area, in the Boxford, North Andover area. There are some condos in North Andover that has a pond, and they fly in and they stay for the summer.
Really?
And then behind Paisley's farm in West Boxford.
Really? And that
They
I
had
painted
two-
there. I've never seen swans.
This year was the first year. I was talking to the farmer, the gentleman, and he said it was the first year that they flew in, and they stayed for a few weeks.
Oh, there's something
But it was so neat
romantic about
yeah,
them, or
because it's wetlands behind there, so they were just
Yeah.
kind of floating around. And
this. I'm using my brushes pretty roughly here, just scooping up the paint, going against the grain like that, and
fills the brush a lot.
does. I was at a workshop with Janet Fish, who's a famous artist, and she was doing that, and somebody said, "Won't you ruin your brushes?" And she said, "So what? That's what they're for." There you go.
True. Now, the expense of brushes, you have to use very good brushes.
Well, I'm not
made of what?
I'm not painting with very good sable brushes, which is what the very good expensive ones are. In watercolor, you really have to have that, the good ones. But in this, you can get away with bristles, and they do get ruined. And you see how rough that one is? That was originally a filbert. It had a nice shape, but because it's one of my favorite brushes, it keeps coming out.
And you don't want to give it up.
And I don't want to give it up, that's right. So we'll just put the larger shapes of the water lilies. And usually you get a shadow under the water lily, and there's very often a little red line under the bottom of a water lily, a purple. Put that in. This green is so strong, you almost always have to mix a red or an orange with it. So basically it's just small shapes, or bigger shapes to smaller shapes, and then you work on details.
Now, as we were working, you said you used to teach, but you don't anymore. But you're always taking workshops and lessons yourself.
I do take lessons myself. I really love, it's always someone who knows more than you do. And I like to study with, for instance, David Curtis down in Gloucester. And he told his students one day that I was a ringer because I had won the prize in Rockport. But he knows way more than I do about painting. So it's a pleasure to paint with him.
Plus, if you just love to paint, you don't really care where you're painting.
That's true. As
long as you're painting.
That's very true. And sometimes that's what a workshop is all about. It's about painting for a week.
Learn a couple of things from someone else, or little techniques, or.
And now here's where the oil comes in, because you can make a very soft edge, or you can make a very hard edge. Acrylics are more hard-edged. You can make a soft edge with them, but generally speaking.
So you've got the black mask of the swan, and then the
orange
beak.
Which doesn't want to. Now I've made a mess of my paints. They're all over the place here. And again, I've got a little bit of a mistake there. Made his beak too fat, so I just take it off. When it's wet, you can do that. Now, if you paint over it, a mistake or a problem like that, and it's continuous, not really a mistake. That's what the painting process is. You paint this, and then you paint that. You don't want that to show. Maybe you want this here and that line to go behind it. It's just a continual editing. You keep going.
And that's the advantage of oils.
That's the advantage of oils. They stay open longer. So I can finish this up later.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful having you here, and it's just amazing to watch someone paint so quickly and be able to see how gorgeous it is. And the image just from nothing appears. Just okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure
It's
having
a pleasure
you on the
to
show.
meet you.
This is Spotlight Georgetown, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
Many foods contain a lot more salt than you think. Too much salt can lead to high blood pressure, heart attack, and stroke. Compare labels. Choose less sodium.